Well, happy Tuesday, everyone. Let's see. I don't think my last, well, I was here last Tuesday. I wasn't here Thursday, and of course Sunday. Um, I was out for the weekend with my lovely wife. If you missed it, I did record a regular podcast episode with Philip Gillott, and you can watch that on YouTube. I'll have the audio for you Spotify and iTunes, Apple listeners and so forth. I'll have that up tomorrow. So, so, hey, hello everyone. Darren, Scott Thomas, Kelly, Alan, and Julia. Finally catching one of these live, she says. Uh, yeah, I'm glad. Good to see you, so to speak. Dave, ditto. Kelly, the weekend away for our anniversary was wonderful. Just, us in this little picturesque town about an hour and a half from here, in a hotel for 2 nights that we saved up for, and I just felt like we were in this bubble, uh, away from the world. You know what I mean? No one knew where we were, and just left all of our day-to-day stuff and took off. And I'll tell you something funny. What I said to Danielle was, "Hey Kim," what I said to Danielle is, well, first of all, the background for anyone who doesn't know is we live about half an hour to 35 to 40 minutes south of Dallas. And of course, Fort Worth is directly west of Dallas. It's all one huge metroplex. Anyway, I said let's just go west. Let's go west west of Fort Worth, and that's all I know. Yeah, that's as far as I've planned. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, okay." And uh, did she do any grading? No, she did do a little bit of work last night. We were just relaxing. I was reading, and we actually had a room, $5 more a night. We had a room that was bigger with a desk and a couch and everything too. So I think that was $5 well spent. Of course, it was a Sunday night and a Monday night, so us and like six other people were the only people in the hotel. Anyway, Danielle's like, okay, west of Fort Worth, and she found this little town, Granbury, Granbury, and look that up if you feel like it. But there's some really cool couples things to do. Um, we walked around there downtown and held hands. And what else did we do? We had a nice dinner in this restaurant. Forget the name of it, but there's a lake in Granbury, a really nice lake, and the restaurant was right on the lake. So, yeah. Anyway, for those of you who are here to listen to me read a horror story, you not only get that on Tuesday nights, but you get updated on my life. So there we go. This little guy here that you can't see, Monty, um, missed me a lot. Logan took good care of him. Jupiter missed me. Darren wants to know if I've ever been to a ghost town. No, I don't think so. although I've been to towns where there are haunted, buildings and venues and so forth, we didn't get to go to the supposedly haunted one in Granbury because it was closed on Mondays. But we're definitely gonna check it out next time. And so, yeah, it was a really cute little town with a really nice lake. And interestingly, when I was there, I was just doing some web searching about the town, and apparently there's a Bitcoin mining place, and apparently mining Bitcoin makes a lot of noise. And you can look it up. If you Google Granbury and Bitcoin, you'll come across this article from, I think, about a year ago, where they were given it was given residents migraines and so on, and it's wild. We didn't hear anything, but we weren't anywhere near there. And we went to this cool, yeah, I think I have heard of the Hum, Alan, but refresh my memory, would you? Um, we went to this cool little bookstore in Granbury, and we were there, and it was just, you know, uh, just browsing and everything. And I asked the guy where the horror section was. They did have a small horror section, and I picked this up, American Scary, and I've started reading a bit of it. It is nonfiction. American Scary: A History of Horror from Salem to Stephen King and Beyond. Oh yeah, low frequency hums, and even below the range that a human ear can hear, can there are certain frequencies that can cause the human body to be very nervous or afraid, uneasy. It's pretty interesting. Anyway, not that I barely started this book, but it's really interesting. And I'm in a bookstore an hour and a half away from town. What do I see? But my friend Paul Tremblay has the first blurb on the back. American Scary: A Rigorous History. And I thought, well, I know Paul. If Paul likes it, I'm sure I will. A rigorous history of American horrors, real and fictional, is clear-eyed, unflinching, comprehensive in scope and detail, and entertaining as hell. A remarkable achievement. So, yeah, check that out if you feel like it. It's available in Kindle, and gosh, I think it's available on Audible too, but I didn't look. But it was a really cute little bookstore. Very nice. Oh, and Danielle's like, yeah, show him where the horror section is because he's got a horror podcast. So the guy that was um, minding the store was really interested and asked me. He pulled up Spotify on his phone. He's like, "Are you on Spotify?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm on Spotify." And pulled it up and he said, "I've got a couple of long trips in the car, and this will help keep me from being too bored." And I was like, "Well, I hope it'll help keep you from being too bored." So I told him if he likes the podcast, email me. And if he doesn't like the podcast, email me. Anyway, this podcast here, the Tuesdays and Thursdays are YouTube only. The regular podcast, the audio goes to all the other places too, as you guys probably know. Anyway, I asked a writer I know by the name of Max D. Stanton, Stanton. I have a link to his two books in the show notes. One is called Frankenstein Enterprises. It's a horror novel. Yep, you're special, Kim, very much. And that's really good. You could talk to Bridget Brenmark about that one because she helped me interview him, and she really liked the book too. She loves that kind of thing. The other book is called A Season of Loathsome Miracles, and it's a collection of his short stories. And he's got quite an imagination, and he's very, very original. And I am going to read my favorite short story from a really great collection. Um, One thing, the name of this short story is called "Burn the Witch," and it uh, it's in first person, and as usual, the witch is a woman, but I'm going to read it anyway, and we'll just look past that because it's a really, really, really great story. And let me take a drink of water here, and we are going to read. I highly recommend that you get these two books and read these two books, and I've got links to both in the show notes, as I said. All right, here is Burn the Witch by Max D. Stanton from his collection A Season of Loathsome Miracles. I've already done one podcast tonight. I recorded a podcast, Patreon podcast, with Laird, John, and Mark Rainey. We talked about David Lynch, and that'll be up for Patreons tomorrow on the Patreon. So I'm kind of talked out already, but I will do my best. By the way, how's everyone doing? Let me know how you're doing in the live chat. I hope you're having a good week so far. And thanks for spending part of your night with me. Thanks for being part of the Lovecraft Easing. And it's not just a podcast. It's not just a website, Facebook groups, all that, so forth. It's a community. More than anything else, it's a community. And you're part of it, and I'm glad you are. Kim, quit doom scrolling. I don't want you to look at the news for 3 days, Kim. Kim was like, I will look at the news if I feel like it, buddy. All right, Burn the Witch by Max D. Stanton from A Season of Loathsome Miracles. I step out of my jail cell, blinking as I emerge from the dungeon's gloom into the sunny execution grounds. Church bells peal in celebration of my doom, and the townsfolk are all packed, cheek to jowl, cheering and jesting like it's carnival time. Everyone's come out to watch an old crone die screaming, "Burn the witch!" they chant. "Burn the witch!" The stake and the platform and the kindling are barely 100 paces away. My hands are bound so tight that they're turning purple, and there's another rope wrapped around my neck. The executioner's got hold of that one. He yanks it like he's trying to move a stubborn mule rather than a frail woman, nearly pulling me off my feet and sending pain shooting up through my legs and hips. My knees have ached for years, and a fortnight in chains has only made them stiffer and weaker. My wrists are in even worse shape, and if they weren't going numb, I'd be in agony. The inquisitor walking beside me mutters insincere prayers in bad Latin. The Duke himself waits for me ahead by the pyre, eager to pronounce my death sentence as soon as the inquisitor hands me over to his secular authority. The bastards think they've got me, and I will indeed die today. But before I burn, I will see all of my enemies destroyed. Even though my time in the dungeon hasn't done my roomy eyes any favors, I can still make out a few familiar faces in the crowd. Up ahead, the cloth merchant, Peter Morgan, and his squalling brood of ugly children have claimed the prime viewing space closest to the pyre. They must have gotten here at the crack of dawn to get that spot, or more likely, Peter bullied some other man out of it. Of all my accusers, he is the one that I hate the most. It's not because his testimony was the most damning, far from it. Even if he'd never spoken a single word against me, they'd still be leading me to the stake now. I hate Peter Morgan with an acid passion, because he is the only man who bore false witness against me. Marta Cooper cowers behind her husband and whimpers as I pass by. She told the Inquisitor that she saw me take on the form of a hideous beast she couldn't even name. I don't mind watching her squirm a bit, but I don't bear her any particular grudge. She did, after all, catch a glimpse of me playing with ectoplasm, whirling matter out of nothingness into astonishing new configurations. Bandy-legged Tom averts his eyes when I gaze in his direction, and well he might be sheepish. All the Inquisitor had to do was show Tom the instruments of torture, and Tom blubbered about the midnight feasts and bonfires in the woods, giving my name up as the instigator of it all. Still, there's no need to revenge myself on that cripple. While he should have kept his fool mouth shut, I don't begrudge any man his cowardice. We've all got a right to save our own skins. Peter Morgan, on the other hand, that simpering, self-satisfied gossip and snitch, he stood before the court of the Inquisition in his Sunday finery and gold chains and perjured himself against me, for no purpose besides his own amusement. He told them I tried to buy his soul, as if I'd have any use for that greasy thing. He said that I'd tried to seduce him with a love philter, a notion that makes me want to vomit, and now there he is, smiling, laughing, pointing me out to his brats like I was an ape on display, puffed up as proud as Satan, but with none of the accomplishments. He'll be the first one I take. I have very little time left before I die, but time is a place where the soul is confined, and I know the prison's layout, its escape routes, the secret passages to other cells. I've read every page of the Necronomicon of Abdul al-Hazred, and I've modeled its diagrams of infinity in knots of twigs and bones. I've forgotten some of the subtleties in my old age, but the fundamentals are all very much with me. I visualize the whirls and loops of temporal space in my mind's eye, and my spirit leaps backwards through time to attack my enemy in the past. Because, time isn't linear, it's all timey-wimey. That's not from the story. Suzanne, hi. The world explodes into a riot of unnameable colors and screeching sounds as I leave my body behind to travel through the inner Chronos. The first time I did this, I was so overwhelmed that I lost my way, and I wound up millions of years before the Earth even formed. It took me centuries of subjective time to find my way back to my own era and my own flesh, and it's miraculous that I didn't go mad in the process. I must be very careful not to go off the trail now. To be stranded bodiless in the inner Chronos is a fate far worse than death. I latch onto Pater Morgan's soul in the so-called present day, and I follow it pastwards, tracking him through time towards his boyhood. I travel the trail for about 30 years and then re-enter temporal space. Now I have to find a sleeping body for my mind to inhabit, but that's easy enough. I spy a maid dozing in a barn and slip into her like I'm putting on new clothes. I stretch out on the hay bale that my host was napping on, and I admire my borrowed form. It's such an immense pleasure to be in a young, strong, healthy body again that I spend a few moments simply savoring it, running my hands up and down this supple form. When you've been in constant aching pain for as long as I have, the absence of it becomes a delicious joy. She speaks the truth. But I can only indulge for so long. There's another joy I'm after, less delicious but more satisfying. I still have the scent of Pater Morgan's soul, and I follow it like a hound. It's an odd feeling to be back in my hometown 3 decades prior. The past is a country that is foreign and familiar simultaneously. My neighbors all look so much younger. So many men and women that I've seen dead and buried are walking the streets going about their business. I realize that I've forgotten many of their names. My younger self is around here somewhere too, but I stay away from any place she might be. Knotting up the fabric of space-time is a risky business, and I'm only after one man. I don't want to tear the whole cosmos apart. I find Pater Morgan fishing down by the stream. While he's just a youth now, I can see the corrupt, lying merchant he'll become. He's by himself, which is perfect for my purposes. And he's right at the age where a pretty girl like the one whose body I've borrowed can talk him into anything at all. He drops his pole and hops to his feet when he sees me approaching. There's a sly smile on his lips, a lustful gleam in his eye. I mirror it back at him, and his grin grows broader. He doesn't suspect a thing. He thinks today's his lucky day. We exchange a few indecent pleasantries, and then I take young Pater by the hand and I lead him away to the loneliest place in the woods. It's a place where a man might scream and not be heard. I know the loneliest place in the woods quite well. When I am finished, I return the girl to the place where I found her sleeping. She'll remember all this as nothing more than a bad dream. It pains me to leave her lovely, youthful body, but I can't stay here indefinitely. I've known folks who, if in their moments of final extremity, tried to leave their own failing forms behind and spend eternity in borrowed flesh. That sort of thing never ends well. I leave the past and return to my last hour. I rejoin my body at the very instant that I left it. I see my soul leaving even as I arrive. My captors won't have noticed a thing. I look back to the spot nearest the pyre and see that Pater Morgan is gone. Most of these people won't even remember that he ever existed. He's gone from being one of the town's leading men to being a boy who vanished many years ago. His children are all gone too, cut out of existence entirely, like stray threads clipped off a frayed cloth. Frayed cloth. I say this every time, but if I was narrating a book for someone, obviously it wouldn't be live and I could cut out all my mistakes. But you guys get the live version. By the way, if you're a writer who has short stories out there and you'd like me to read one on Tuesday night sometime, email me and we'll see if it's a good fit. Lovecraftezine@gmail.com. If I read someone's story like Max's tonight, then I want to point people in the direction of their book so that they can enjoy the other things they've written. All right. One down. The pyre is 50 strides away. The Inquisitor's thin voice drones on from behind my shoulder. He's a dark, skinny, rather seedy-looking Dominican. A Walloon, I think. He arrived in town only a few weeks ago, at the invitation of our beloved Duke. The Duke just couldn't stand for there to be witch hunts and burnings in his neighbors' lands, without getting a piece of that fun for himself. Men will become jealous of each other for such strange reasons. This monk doesn't speak much or go in for grand proclamations, but his office and function alone make him a powerful rabble-rouser. The finger-pointing and accusations began even before his arrival, as soon as word spread that he was coming. People brought out the long knives against all the strange folk, the pushy women, and the dreamy boys, and everyone else who didn't live up to notions about what they weren't supposed to be. We're supposed to be. I am sorry, I am out of it tonight. And the dreamy boys that everyone else who didn't live up to notions, and everyone else who didn't live up to notions about what they were supposed to be. All right. As a cranky, well-read, never-married woman, I suppose I would have been a target for my neighbor's accusations and the Inquisitor's scrutiny, even if I weren't actually a bride of Satan. It's a good thing that I actually committed many of the crimes they leveled against me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have any recourse against those swine now. The monk came for me early in the morning, escorted by two of the Duke's soldiers. They did not knock. You should know that the good folk of this town have charged you with the grave crimes of sorcery and witchcraft, he said. When he talked to me, he'd fix his empty gaze over my shoulder. I don't think he looked into my eyes even once in all the time we spent together. It is my privilege and right to determine the truth of it. You must come with me. At that moment, I could have done 1,000 ghastly things to him, and neither his bodyguards, nor his crucifix, nor anything else could have saved him. But I went with him regardless. if I'd have destroyed him then, more would have just come following. Like ants, squashing one doesn't do any good. The Inquisitor began by showing me the tools of his trade, apparently hoping that alone would be enough to terrify me into giving in. The fool just didn't know who he was dealing with. I've been to the citadel of burning glass. I've met the pale angels with razor blade wings who dwell there, and let them escort me to the farthest realms of excruciating agony and blinding pleasure. Thumbscrews and hot irons still hurt, but after what I've experienced, they don't frighten. It's the constant, grinding, wearying pains of old age that I dread, not the depredations of the torturer. And so I told the tonsured moron to go ahead and do his worst. His worst wasn't nearly as bad as he thought it was. Whenever it got uncomfortable, I would recall my time at the Citadel, and whatever the monk was up to seemed like a tickle by comparison. My refusals to shriek and plead frustrated him enormously, but I'm too old to pretend that I felt something just to spare a man's feelings. That's a young girl's game. Throughout all of it, the Inquisitor kept asking the same questions again and again. He wanted to know if I had seen the devil. He asked if I had seen the devil after shoving my head into a bucket of icy water, and after scorching my flesh with a red-hot poker. He asked if I had seen the devil after depriving me of sleep for days, and after sticking needles beneath my fingernails. My approach then was to damn him as a fool, while admitting nothing and denying nothing. This offended him horribly, far worse than any confession of diabolical orgies would have done. But now I shall answer his question. I speak a few of my beloved's names beneath my breath as I walk to the stake. Astoreth, Belial, Old Nick, I whisper longingly. Lucifer, Beelzebub, Moloch, my darling. He is always present beside me. He is always present beside all of us, but I feel his form solidify. And when I turn my head, he is there, unseen by anyone but me. He stands impossibly tall and erect, a proud, dignified giant, dressed in robes so black that they drink the light. As always, he wears a mask to spare me from the annihilating glory of his countenance. Today it's a goat. His golden eyes glitter with intelligence and playful malice from beneath the holes in the leather. Greetings, my child, he says. No two people hear the same thing when he speaks, but I experience his voice as deep and musical and soothing. Hello, old friend, I whisper. I think I've danced at my last sabbat. Nonsense. You are dancing still. You will dance forever. I see you on walls Persianat. I'm absolutely certain I mispronounced that. Of 40 years ago, hanging a garland of flowers around my neck and kissing me. Even now, you are a beautiful girl flying amidst the night birds on your broomstick, naked and shining with grease rendered from the fat of hanged men. The Sabbat never ends. You know what I mean, you flatterer. You see the pyre yonder. I do. What would you have me do about it? When my beloved asks a question, it fires the imagination and brings countless possibilities to mind. De Bronzo! The Inquisitor asked me if I had seen the devil. Despite his piety, I think he wants to know what you look like. When the flames kiss the pyre, please grant his wish. My beloved leans in close, so I can kiss his forehead one last time. It shall be my pleasure. Then he stares hard at the Inquisitor. The monk sees nothing, not yet anyways, but he shudders and forgets his prayers. You asked me if I saw the devil, I tell the monk. I never did, not once, but you shall. We come now before the Duke. He's seated upon a handsome chair of dark wood, swaddled in fur and velvet, surrounded by his soldiers and his counselors and his family. There's little that I despise more than a high-born lowlife. For years he's been driving this land to ruin by waging wars, imposing larcenous taxes, and pointedly neglecting anything that might pass for civic improvement. And when people ask why life here is so hard and dismal, oh, it's all the fault of the witches and the Jews. I'll never get political on this show because, despite my strong feelings, I believe that people deserve to have a place to get away to where they can escape all that, you know, even if briefly. But I will say what she just said hits home a little bit. All right, the Duke starts droning on with the legal formalities of my condemnation. You know what, Monty? He wouldn't like you either, little Mr. Black Cat, you or Jupiter. I didn't pay attention during my trial, and I don't pay attention now. Instead, I looked past the Duke to his wife and daughter. Unbeknownst to the Duke, his women have danced with me in the woods on many a moonlit evening. Hmm. They have often stolen away from their domestic errands to ask my counsel on matters great and small. He doesn't know what they really think of him. As far as I can tell, the brute thinks that he well deservedly basks in their quiet, dutiful love. I look to Elisa, the Duke's long suffering wife. She's staring down at her own feet. Fair enough, she never really wanted my way of life. All that she wanted was to know that another world existed, to get a glimpse of a world bigger than her castle. She's an explorer, content to gaze briefly on the shoreline of a new continent, without actually leaving footprints on its sand. Reminds me of a certain nameless protagonist in a book called The Sea of Ash by Scott Thomas. One of the best novellas I've ever read. Anyway, then I looked at Petra, the Duke's daughter and youngest child. Her eyes are narrow, blue daggers. She inherited her father's rage, but it's a dangerous thing to be a woman with a man's temper. The mother being the gentle creature she is, I had to teach the daughter how to deal with her anger, how to rage like a woman. She was a good and eager pupil. When you've known someone for a long time, and I've known Petra since before she was born, it's easy to talk even if you can't say a thing. Petra understands me immediately. I don't think she'd have resorted to patricide if it was only about herself. But we'll do things for our friends that we wouldn't do for ourselves. Without needing to gaze into the future, I know that in the next few weeks she will go out to the woods to pick some pretty, cheerful looking flowers that I've taught her about. Soon thereafter, her father will come down with a terrible stomach ache. And soon after that, her older brother will be the new Duke. The executioner prods me, and I realize that I'm supposed to say something. I asked you, do you repent? The Duke sneers. I spit. If I was closer, I'd have hit him in the eye. But at this range, the best I can do is splatter his boots. The Duke trembles in his seat and goes red, and the crowd suddenly goes silent. I doubt the Duke's ever been treated with such disrespect before. I'm happy to treat him to a new experience. And it's not like there's anything he can do to retaliate. Not at this point. What's he going to do? Order me burned alive? Damned hag! He bellows, his precious composure shattering in front of all his subjects. Burn the witch! The silence breaks, and the mob cheers lustily the moment the sentence is issued. I glance back in their direction, and I am nearly overcome by the revulsion that I feel towards these braying, ungrateful illiterates. Over the years, so many of these peasants snuck to my cottage when nobody was looking, begging me for a love charm, or a fortune telling, or a folk remedy, or an abortion. So many of them came out to the midnight celebrations that I arranged, seeking a few moments of illicit pagan joy to brighten the drabness of their regimented lives. They might well be burning beside me if I'd told the Inquisitor their names. But even though they are full of spiteful joy right now, soon enough they'll be weeping. For there will be a season of loathsome miracles to mark my passing. When their babies are born blind, and their cows calve two-headed, carnivorous prodigies, and slimy, poisonous creatures fall from the sky instead of rain, they will think of me and shudder. The executioner drags me onto the killing platform. My beloved remains at the Inquisitor's side. What happens next, I must face alone. The end. Just kidding. There's more to it. The executioner, Dortmund is his name. I've known him since he was a pup, and his daddy was the local neck stretcher. He's a big, unwashed lout, and he loves his work. Ordinarily, I like a man who's expert in his field, but this time I make an exception. As he's binding me to the stake, I withdraw from my flesh and I slip away into his future. Just like I did with the late unlamented Peter Morgan, I use Dortmund's soul as my point of reference in the chaos of the inner Chronos, pursuing the executioner through every hour of his life to come. Traveling into the future is even more difficult and uncertain than going into the past. The road is as fluid as a stormy sea, and wrong turns into an empty limbo of unrealized possibility are an ever-present danger. But with Dortmund as my unwilling guide, I know I'll get where I need to go. I follow him for his whole life. From my death day onwards, he'll always have a vague sense that he is being pursued, a feeling of dread that he cannot place or explain. Good. I say that is just brilliant. Max is a really imaginative writer. All right, while I finish this story, do me a favor, and if you're watching live, yeah, DeBronzo, you'll love it, really, man. No kidding. I read a lot of good collections and some bad ones, but this collection is really a cut above uh, most, and he deserves to be known more. Max Stanton. When I feel his dismal, puny soul starting to crumble, I re-enter temporal space, borrowing the first sleeper that I find. This time it's a little boy, no more than 8 or 9. Fine for my purposes. I sniff the wind for the souls of my enemies and catch 2 familiar scents, one of them very close. I mean, think about that sentence. What a great sentence. I sniff the wind for the souls of my enemies. Anyway, I was going to ask all of you while you're watching live in the side chat, tell me where you are. I don't mean your address, but like Scott, I bet, is listening in his study at home. Um, yeah, let me know where you're watching from. I sniff the wind for the souls of my enemies and catch 2 familiar scents. New Jersey, DeBronzo, you know what I mean. That DeBronzo. Let's see. I follow it past refuse heaps and dung hills to a gloomy alley where a creature in rags shivers and twitches on a urine-damp cobblestones. One of his hands continually traces nonsense patterns in the air. The other smacks against the back of his own head ceaselessly, as if he's trying to knock something out of there. He's aged 100 years in 20, but I'd never mistake this eminence. It's my old friend, the Inquisitor. Kim, that's funny. That's now you're okay, DeBronzo. Now you're on my list. Okay. Hail and well met, I tell him. Do you know who I am? From his fearful howls and his desperate attempts to crawl away through the nearest wall, it's plain that he does. I grab a hold of his matted beard and twist it to get a good look at his face. Staring deep into his eyes, I see hell reflected back at me. The ex-monk whispers, all right, I'm sorry, I'm out of sorts tonight. Let me try that again. The ex-monk whimpers softly and wets himself. You used to be such a cold fish, I tell him. You could put hot irons to an old woman without even flinching, without showing any human feeling at all. You didn't feel anything inside back then, did you? "Ugh," he groans. He nods fiercely, but I don't know if the gesture is voluntary. Cold fish, thoughts all slimy. You posed me a question once, Inquisitor. You asked me if I had seen the devil. You were very insistent. Devils, he blathers. Levels of devils at their revels forever, oh God. Oh God, his face. Is your curiosity satisfied now? He explodes into idiot laughter. I ponder showing some mercy and prying up a cobblestone to knock out his brains. I decide against it. He shouldn't have asked me the question if he couldn't bear the answer. I leave him behind to his slow death of madness and press on to the outskirts of town. Dortmund still dwells in the same mean, desolate hut he inhabited 20 years ago, within spitting distance of the potter's field where so many of his victims lie buried, myself included. The town's faithful executioner spent all these years getting his hands bloody for these people, and they wouldn't even let him live amongst them. There's a lesson in that. A dim light gleams in the window, and I peer inside and see the executioner, old and withered, and on his deathbed. From the way he's wheezing and coughing, it's plain that his lungs are failing. He's alone in his last moments. I think he's been alone all along. There's certainly no sign that any wife or child ever lived here. No hint of cheer. Just a few sticks of furniture and a sputtering candle. Jeez, not even Wi-Fi. I'm glad that I let Dortmund live out his full span. Just being himself for so many years was a worse punishment than any I'd have devised. And indeed, for all my secret knowledge and power, if Dortmund hadn't burned me, I'd eventually have met a similar death to the one he's experiencing now, all feeble and isolated and pathetic. Which isn't to say that I'm letting him go, of course. Not in my nature. I step inside and pick up the candle. He's in such bad shape it takes him a few moments to realize that there's anyone else in the shack. He seems very confused when he finally notices the child hovering over his bedside. Hello? He gasps. Hello, Dortmund, I reply. You remember me? You burned me to death many years ago. I told you that someday I'd return the favor. I told you I'd bring you a candle to light your path to hell. The executioner's face lights up with horror as he recalls. I make a mental note to tell him about the candle when I get back to the present. so he'll remember it in the future. He tries to scream, but all he can produce is a wet, ghostly rattle. I toss the candle onto his bed. Dortmund shrieks and picks it up, but by the time his clumsy old hands have got it, his blanket and the straw mattress are already burning. He tries to stand and run with no luck. This was already his deathbed even before I set it on fire. The best he can do is roll onto the floor and crawl towards the exit, while flames climb the walls and the smell of roasting pork wafts through the air. Just to be sure, I put the latch on the door as I leave. I put my borrowed body back to bed, and I come back into the present moment where my doomed executioner, now young and vital again, is tying me to the stake. For just a moment there in the future, I felt a drop of pity for him, but from the vicious pain he's inflicting with the ropes and the dumb, sadistic grin on his face, I'm glad about his fate. Someday, I'll see you burning alive too, I tell him. Someday, I'll bring you a candle to light your way to hell. Remember that. He crosses himself and scoffs, but I know to a certainty that he'll never forget my curse. Well, I'm glad you liked the story, Kim, everyone. It's very original. Once the knots are tied to Dortmund's satisfaction, he ignites the kindling beneath the platform with a burning brand. Smoke billows up, stinging my eyes and throat, and I feel the heat spreading beneath me. In the crowd, I see my beloved stand before the Inquisitor, with his back to me, and remove his mask. The monk shrieks horribly and faints dead away. That's the last of it. I cut it awfully close, but now all my debts have been paid. Even now, as tongues of fire are rising up through the planks of the platform and licking at my feet, it's not too late for me to get out of this deal. And honestly, I'm awfully tempted to make my escape. There are plenty of ways I could do it. I could go into the past again and twist it between my fingers until it becomes a present, where I am sitting at home with my tea and books, free and unmolested. Or if I was feeling especially vindictive, I could trace the sorrowful sigil with my toe and open a hole for the infinitely hungry things that dwell in the down below lands to crawl up through. I have to admit it'd be fun to see the looks on these yokels' faces if I did that. But what then? My eyes are getting too dim to read my books of magic, or see secret knowledge in the guts of a dove. My knobby hands are too twisted and clumsy for me to craft any more sculptures of time, or to brew up marvels in my cauldron. And worst of all, my beautiful mind, my most prized possession of all, has begun to slip away from me in fits and starts. He used to be sharper than the wings of those razor blade angels, but every day it gets a little duller. Every day I'm a little more forgetful. From here on out, this road doesn't go anyplace good. For 86 years, I've lived a wonderful life. It's been the best existence I could have wanted. I've learned so much, experienced so much, loved so much. I've seen the whole world, and oh, what a world it is. I've seen worlds beyond this one, and sang along with the music of the spheres. But now, like a drop of water falling back into the sea, it's time for my separate existence to end, and for me to rejoin something so much bigger than myself. Before I was me, I was earth, and air, and fire, and water. I was animals and plants, and bugs and rocks and salt, and the very stars that shine in the sky. It's time for me to do and be those things again. So if a tear or two rolls down my craggy old cheeks as the flames rise up around me, please know that it's not from fear or pain or sorrow. They're tears of joy. Today, I lose myself, but I gain everything else. Burn the witch. The end. And I would say that's definitely in the top, I don't know, 30 or 40 short stories I've ever read in my life. I I think a lot of Max. Um, so yeah, the name of this collection is A Season of Loathsome Miracles by Max D. Stanton. If you're new, I am not getting paid to say these things. Just consider it my job to let people know about stories and books and writers and artists and creators that I think that I love and that I think more people should know about. So yeah, Scott, he's got a hell of an imagination. Um, he really does. So for those of you who pick up this collection and read it, all I ask for referring this to you is please shoot me an email and let me know what you thought. I really appreciate it when people do that. Um, I also appreciate everyone who's a patron. I literally could not do this if it wasn't for the patrons. That's the thing that keeps me going. Otherwise, I'd have to go drive Uber or something. Wouldn't be able to do this. Darren says, have you ever read the anthology Devils and Demons? No, that doesn't ring a bell, Darren. Who's the author? Or I'm sorry, you said anthology, not collection. Who's the editor? And I'll check it out. Thanks. Uh, Alan says very good. Such a gift with memorable phrases. Yeah, it really is. Um, Julia, it's your first time here live, right? If I remember correctly. Julie says, really great story. Thanks for reading. Well, thanks for listening to me read. Thanks to all of you for spending part of your Tuesday night with me. If you're a Patreon, you will get a new Patreon only podcast tomorrow. That would be Wednesday. And I did an episode with Laird Barron, John Langan, Stephen Mark Rainey, and we talked about David Lynch and his work and his legacy. And very interestingly, how David Lynch informed their work. And one of the things that Laird says is paraphrasing is that the dread that he felt watching Lost Highway, he knew that he wanted to impart that dread in his work. That's a short version of what he said, but I think you will. I think you'll really enjoy this episode. We did about an hour and 15 minutes. Yeah, just email me later, Darren. Thank you. And if you're not a Patreon, I really hope you'll consider it. It starts at only $5 a month, and there are those of us who honestly can't afford even $5 a month. But you know, most of us can, and when you think about it, all that is a cup of coffee or whatever at Starbucks, and it's only once a month. And it's less than if you go to McDonald's, it's less than your meal at McDonald's. And again, only once a month. I think you get a lot of bang for the buck, and I know that all my current patrons would agree. $5 and up patrons, that's the bottom level, and $5 and up, everyone gets all the Patreon podcasts, okay? So it's not a bait and switch or anything like that. At the higher levels, I won't be a used car salesman here, but I'll just say that there's a lot of really cool things and merch. And the next level up, you get to hang out with us on Zoom every Friday night, and that's a lot of fun. We don't record that or broadcast it. We just, the patrons hanging out with myself and the panelists. So, um, if you have a request, if you're not a writer and you have a request for me to read a short story some Tuesday night, email me, lovecrafteasian@gmail.com. If you email me and ask me to read a Stephen King story or a John Langan story or a I don't know, Shirley Jackson story or a Susan Hill story, I probably won't be able to do that. But if I know the writer and they are able to allow me to, most of the writers I know will let me do that. It's just a question of whether they're allowed to or not. Darren says, what level do you get books? You get books at the $25 a month and up level, Darren. And you get other merch and stuff. But again, you can just start at $5 a month if you'd like. If you want to really hang out with us and everything, go to the $10 a month level. And in addition to the Patreon podcast, just hang out with us every Friday night and talk. It's a lot of fun. Thanks, guys, for spending the evening with me. And I hope you enjoyed it. Really appreciate all of you watching. And I will see you all on Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern. So, see you then. Enjoy your week until then. Good night.